Good evening everyone. I'm the storyteller and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. The Lantern Keeper. The forest was thick, the kind of thick where the trees seemed to lean in closer the deeper you went. Their gnarled branches clawed at the sky, and the fog, always the fog, hung low, like a damp blanket smothering the world. It was the kind of place where you could walk for hours and never see the sun, where the air tasted of moss and decay, and where the silence was so heavy it pressed against your ears. In the middle of this forest, where no sane person would dare to venture, stood the lighthouse. It was an old thing, its white paint peeling like dead skin, its iron railings rusted and brittle. It didn't belong there, not in the woods, not miles from any ocean. But there it was, jutting out of the earth like a broken bone, its beam cutting through the fog in slow, deliberate sweeps. And in that lighthouse lived the Lantern Keeper. No one knew his real name, not anymore. If he had one, it had been lost to time, buried under the weight of years and the whispers of the forest. He was an old man, bent and gnarled like the trees around him, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes two dull coins sunk deep into his skull. He moved slowly, methodically, as if every step, every breath, was part of some ancient ritual. Every night, without fail, he lit the lanterns. They hung from the trees, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, their glass panes fogged with age. Some were cracked, others missing pieces, but they all held a flame, a tiny flicker of light that seemed to pulse in time with the lighthouse beam. The Lantern Keeper moved among them like a ghost, his gnarled hands lighting each one with a match that never seemed to burn out. The lanterns weren't for ships. Everyone in the nearby town knew that, though no one talked about it. They weren't for guiding fishermen home or warning sailors of rocky shores. No, the lanterns were for something else entirely. They were for the lost. Ethan had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. But he didn't believe them. He was a practical man, a hiker who prided himself on his sense of direction and his ability to survive in the wild. Ghosts? Lost souls? Please. That was the kind of nonsense people made up to scare kids or sell books. But now, as he stood at the edge of the forest, the fog curling around his boots like cold fingers, he wasn't so sure. He'd been hiking for hours, following a trail that had seemed straightforward on the map. But the deeper he went, the more the forest seemed to shift, the trees closing in, the path disappearing beneath his feet. And then there was the fog, thick and suffocating, until he couldn't tell which way was up or down. That's when he saw the light. It was faint at first, just a glimmer in the distance, but it was enough to pull him forward. He stumbled through the underbrush, his breath coming in ragged gasps, until he broke into a clearing, and there it was. The lighthouse. It loomed over him, its beam cutting through the fog like a knife. And all around it, hanging from the trees, were the lanterns. Their light was soft, almost gentle, but there was something wrong about it, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Ethan hesitated. He should turn back, he knew that. But the light, it was calling to him, pulling him forward like a moth to a flame. He stepped into the clearing. The Lantern Keeper was waiting for him. The old man stood at the base of the lighthouse, his gnarled hands clutching a matchbox. His eyes, dull and lifeless, fixed on Ethan as he approached. "You shouldn't be here," the keeper said, his voice a dry rasp. "This place isn't for the living." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. I got lost. I saw the light and—" "The light isn't for you," the keeper interrupted. He turned and began to walk toward the trees, his movements slow and deliberate. "Come. You'll see." Ethan followed, though every instinct screamed at him to run. The keeper led him to one of the lanterns, its glass fogged and cracked. Inside, the flame flickered, casting strange shadows on the ground. "Look," the keeper said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan leaned in, his breath catching in his throat. At first, he saw nothing but the flame. But then, as he stared, the light seemed to shift, to twist, until he saw something. A face. Pale and gaunt, its eyes hollow, its mouth open in a silent scream. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding. What is that? The lost, the keeper said. The damned. They wander the forest, searching for a way out. The lanterns, they guide them here. Why? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. What happens to them? The keeper didn't answer. Instead, he turned and began to walk back toward the lighthouse. You should leave, he said over his shoulder. Before it's too late. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He turned and ran, the lantern's light flickering around him like 1,000 watching eyes. He didn't stop until he was out of the forest, the fog lifting, the trees thinning. But as he looked back, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The lanterns were still there, their light pulsing in the distance. And in that light, he saw them, the faces, the hollow eyes, the silent screams. They were watching him. And they were waiting. The end.